You've met someone like this, not loud, not performing, but after an hour in their presence, you feel strangely more real, like you were finally seen by someone who didn't need you to be anything other than what you were. They could sit with you when things were bad, not flinch, not immediately reach for a fix, not change the subject, not say everything happens for a reason, just actually be there. And then later that same day, you'd watch them in a room where something needed to be said, and they'd say it, clearly without apology, without the 3 layers of softening the rest of us would wrap around it. And you'd think, this is the same person. You probably filed it under chemistry or presence, or just some people are like that. But I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I don't think it is that some people are just like that. I think it is that some people stop doing something the rest of us are still doing. Here is the deal. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most of us are handed a contract. No one reads it out loud, no one asks for your signature. But you sign it anyway, because the alternative felt when you were small and needed people, genuinely dangerous. The contract says, you get to keep this half of yourself. The other half, that one makes people uncomfortable, that one doesn't fit. Leave it. For some people, the half that gets left behind is softness, receptivity, the capacity to need, to sit still with grief, to be in the presence of someone else's pain without immediately converting it into a problem to solve. You trade that in and you get called dependable, capable, someone who doesn't make things weird. For other people, the half that gets left behind is authority, the right to take up space, the capacity to say this is what I think, without wrapping it in apology first. You trade that in and you get called sweet, easy to be around, goes with the flow. Either way, you end up with half a self. And here is the brutal part, a half self works. That is what makes the deal so seductive. You can build a life, a career, relationships, a whole functioning adulthood, running entirely on your approved half. People will like you, some will love you. You'll appear, from the outside, to be completely fine. The cost doesn't show up immediately. It shows up in the small freezes. The moment someone needs you to actually be there, not to fix it, just to be there, and you're suddenly nowhere to be found inside yourself. You reach for the tool you always use, and it doesn't fit, and you can feel yourself filling the silence with something that isn't presence. The moment you know exactly what you think, but your mouth opens and something softer, safer, rounder comes out, and the meeting ends, and the thing that needed saying didn't get said, and somehow this is your fault, and you're not even sure how. The moment your friend says something that genuinely hurts, and you say no, it is fine, I'm probably just being sensitive. Not because you believe it, but because the version of you that would have said actually that wasn't okay seems to have left the building. The psychologist D.W. Winnicott called the version of yourself built to survive the terms of that deal the false self. Not fake in the sense of dishonest. Most people running on their false self are earnest, even sincere, but false in the sense of constructed for safety rather than grown from the inside. The false self is a successful adaptation, a coping mechanism that works so well it became an identity. What you lose, living that way, isn't obvious. It is a specific quality of aliveness, the sense that you're actually inhabiting your life rather than performing it from a slight distance. You can be hitting every mark present for it all, and still feel, underneath, like you're watching. That distance is the gap between the half you're running on and the whole one still waiting underneath. I want to be careful here because there is a version of this idea that goes wrong. Psychological wholeness. The thing that makes certain people unforgettable is not about being both soft and strong depending on the situation. It is not strategic range. It is not emotional intelligence deployed in context, appropriate doses. The people who have it are not code switching. What they have is something quieter and stranger than that. The poet John Keats had a phrase for it. He called it negative capability, the capacity to remain in uncertainty and contradiction, in not knowing without grasping for resolution, to hold two things at once without needing to collapse them into one. Most of us, when we encounter contradiction in ourselves, reach for a verdict. We decide which feeling is the real one, which impulse is the legitimate one. We do this because sitting with contradiction is uncomfortable, and we were never taught that it was survivable. The people who stopped needing to do that, they're not comfortable with contradiction because they're emotionally advanced. They're comfortable with it because they stopped fighting one side. This is what the word androgynous actually points at, in its deepest psychological sense. Not aesthetic ambiguity, not charisma, not the performance of both genders. What it points at is something structural. A person who is no longer amputating one half of themselves in order to remain lovable, who has stopped running the suppression process, in whom the door between those two halves isn't locked anymore. And the thing about not running that process is all the energy that was going into it becomes available for other things. For the work, for the people in front of them. For you, in that conversation where you needed someone to actually show up. Winnicott had another concept I keep returning to. The capacity to be alone in the presence of another. To be genuinely with someone else while remaining genuinely with yourself at the same time. Not managing your presentation. Not running the background process of am I too much, am I enough? What do they need me to be right now? Just present to them and to yourself simultaneously. This is rarer than it sounds. Most of what we experience as closeness is actually two people carefully managing their presentations in each other's company. Which is why real presence, when someone is actually there, feels so startling. So unlike most of what we're used to, the philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes about a kind of exhaustion that defines how a lot of us live now. The exhaustion of never stopping, of having so completely internalized the demand to perform, to produce, to be useful, that even rest becomes a project. What gets lost is the capacity for stillness, for genuine reception, for being moved. Think about the last time you let someone's pain actually land, not managed it, not moved to fix it, let it land. If there is a lag before you can answer, you're probably running on the approved half. The approved half doesn't know how to receive. Or the approved half is all reception and no assertion, and you can feel everything but can't say anything clearly when it matters. The person who made you feel so seen, they weren't doing more, they were spending less on containment. I won't tell you this is easy. I don't think it is. The approved half of your personality isn't just a habit. It is a survival strategy that worked. You built it for real reasons in real circumstances. With real stakes, you can't decide your way into wholeness over a weekend. What I've seen, in people I've known, in research, in my own experience, is that it tends to start with a different kind of noticing. Not I should be more vulnerable, not I should be more assertive, not a project aimed at the missing half. Just noticing the freeze, the moment the other half would have spoken and didn't. The moment you reached for the approved response instead of the true one, the reflexive laugh before the thing that actually needed saying, the no worries that came out where actually that hurt should have been. The over-explained apology that took the place of a simple disagreement. The freeze is not failure. The freeze is information. It is where the door used to be. Winnicott believed that the false self always carried a secret, a longing to be found out, not punished, not exposed, but found encountered by something. A person, a moment, sometimes just your own attention, that could receive the other half without needing it to be different. What that encounter asks of you is small and enormous at the same time. Not becoming someone else. Just letting the thing that almost came out, come out. Letting the anger not immediately become politeness. Letting the grief not immediately become a joke. Letting the clarity not immediately get wrapped in 3 layers of I might be wrong about this. But not a transformation. Not a project. Just sometimes letting the door stay open a few seconds longer than usual. Back to the person I worked with. I asked her once, not quite directly, but something like, how are you so not exhausting to be around? She laughed. She said she used to be incredibly exhausting, mostly to herself. That she spent years being very good at the half she was allowed to show, and very quietly at war with the other half. And then something shifted. She described it as, I stopped spending so much energy keeping the door closed. That is not a method. It is not a technique, but I think it is the most honest description I've ever heard of what this looks like from the inside. The people who feel whole to you, who make you feel more real in their presence. They're not carrying less. They're not simpler, not more evolved. They just stop directing so much of themselves toward containment. And here is the thing I want to leave you with. The reason a person like that stops you, the reason you remember them, the reason you feel that particular pull, it is not just because they're impressive. It is because somewhere in you, something recognizes what they have. You're not just admiring it from the outside. You're recognizing something that belongs to you, something you left behind, or were asked to leave behind, so long ago that you forgot it was ever yours. It didn't disappear. It has been waiting, behind whatever door you're still keeping closed. Nim, you don't have to figure it out alone.